Hello, everybody. This is Paige Gardner coming to you. This is Paige Gardner talking. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the Assistant Dean of Students, and I am also the Interim Director for Student Diversity and Multicultural Affairs. Within our office, we have a special program called Undocumented Student Programs, and that is where we build awareness, we build community, and kind of bring ramblers together. And so our hope is to provide a space where students can get some resources, and USP realized that we wanted to have a couple of events that were open to the community, but then also some closed spaces for undocumented and proud. And so with that said, I'm gonna let our campus partners who've graciously decided to join us today introduce themselves, and then I'll also have our undocumented student program intern introduce herself as well and her connection to this topic. I also realized I didn't say the name of the topic. This is about navigating uncertainty. We are aware that our undocumented, documented student populations are awaiting the Supreme Court rulings. We also know that COVID has caused an additional stressor in all of this process. And so again, our hope was to just create a space where we can talk about ways that we can take care of ourselves mentally, emotionally, physically. And so that is why we are partnering with Wellness Center. So Phil, if you'd like to introduce yourself first and maybe your connection to this topic, and then I'll have our campus partners introduce themselves, and we'll keep going.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Silva, and I'm one of the co-interns for USC. And so we wanted to organize just a time for like a community check-in, because as Paige already had stated, there's overlapping concerns within the undocumented community. And so we just wanted to share a space, and if we have questions right now, or how we can help as a program with our undocumented community. We wanted to take the time to acknowledge that. And you said it perfectly, Paige. There's just a lot going on, and so we just kind of wanted to, as best as we could, outline maybe a plan of like a personal plan for ourselves, and how we kind of take in what's going on in the media and the updates that we're getting, and kind of as best as we could, right, compartmentalize, so we're not overwhelmed with like the overpouring of information at every turn.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Andrea Boyd. I'm the staff counselor for diversity, inclusion, and social justice initiatives at Loyola University. This is a new position, and a lot of my work centers around offering emotional wellness support for students whose identities fall under the Office of SDMA, or the Office of Student Diversity and Multicultural Affairs. It's an embedded position, so when we're back on campus, find me in the Damon Center.
My name is Diana Stencil, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker at the Wellness Center. And I provide mental health services as well as mind-body programming. So I am somebody who is very geeked out by nervous system regulation, helping people better understand and take care of mood, and teach mindfulness and yoga for mental health.
All right, so now we're gonna get into our discussion. Again, this is about navigating uncertain times, and so I think we're gonna start with Diana, perhaps, to kind of ground us in this discussion, and we'll just follow Wellness Center's lead and then have some dialogue.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I forgot to say about what brought me here today too is that I have a lot of friends and some family members through relationships who are undocumented or who have been undocumented at some point. So I have been a point person at the Wellness Center for undocumented DACA students, and transitioning that with another colleague, but definitely I'm passionate about that. So that's another reason I'm here, which I forgot to mention. And with that said, I kind of really appreciate what we're talking about uncertainty, because yes, with the coronavirus, it has brought up so many more overlapping issues and made things that were already challenging, amplified that for people who have undocumented status or who have DACA status. So it's broad. It's, you know, our nervous systems are nonverbal, and they just kind of take any kind of threat and just kind of react, right? And so it makes sense that maybe we're hyper aroused and really kind of anxious, or feeling flooded or overwhelmed, or we're maybe shutting down and kind of ignoring. So going into hypoarousal, where we're numbing out, tuning out, spacey. And for me, as a mindfulness mind body teacher, the idea of how we work with uncertainty, it comes from the sense of like finding some ground in the middle of uncertainty. And a friend of mine wrote this poem and shared it with us in January at a retreat. And I think I'd like to start with that. No ground, endless sky, I am floating, desperately trying to feel the ground beneath my feet. If I could just feel the ground, then everything will be okay, right? Keep striving, keep striving. It consumes my every moment. I am tired. Look, the sky is blue and orange and vast. Oh, and listen, the Cardinals are performing their morning symphony. And smell, the flowering lilacs are sprinkling the air with their perfume. The sun warms my shoulders like a handmade blanket from Mom. I am floating. Everything is okay. So in mindfulness, we're always trying to come back to like what's happening in the present moment, and the body is often the way that we can do that. Even if it's for a minute, celebrate that. And those are moments of refuge as we're trying to figure out, how do I take care of myself? What's the next thing? And do I need to worry about this? So maybe a couple times during our little talk, we might do a little bit of trying some different grounding. So if you're listening, or those of you on the call, you can just notice, like maybe you can feel your feet on the floor or your legs on the floor if you're sitting cross-legged. And don't be alarmed if you can't. It certainly happens. And if you do feel your legs or your feet, you might notice if it's stronger on the right side or the left side. So really try and encourage yourself to stay there a little bit if you can. Seeing if you can find the body in the chair and feeling that pressure or contact point or that support. Maybe your back is laying against something or not. Maybe noticing where your arms or hands are resting, and maybe they're resting on another part of the body, and noticing that contact point, that support. If you're lying on the ground, you might have more contact making, registering in your awareness. And then see if that changed things. And maybe it changed it subtly or not. Okay, yeah, so as we go on with the discussion, right, seeing if we can find some ground in the groundlessness, in the uncertainty. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Diana. So I wanted to see if, Andre, you had any thoughts or things that you'd like to share in terms of navigating this tumultuous time, and any, tips or strategies around how to create plans that will maybe give us something to hold on to during these times.
Certainly, I would say even in preparation for today's events, Diane and I had a conversation, and we're thinking about just talking about the idea of uncertainty, right? So given COVID-19 and the tremendous changes that have happened to our day-to-day routines and how we go about getting things accomplished have really shifted dramatically from what we're used to. And there's a lot of questions about when things will get back to normal, how they'll get back to normal, and what that pathway is. And so right now, something that all of us share is uncertainty. And but one of the things that we can do is sort of reflect at this time that this isn't the first time that we have encountered uncertainty, and it won't be the last, right? So that is part of a life that um, we can't know the future. And there are times, maybe in times like this, that it seems um, our desire to know it, to want to control it, might be a little bit more heightened than it is um, than it is on any other given day. But one of the things is just to sort of accept where we are, and to kind of lean into the idea that um, there are some things that are within our control, and there's some that just aren't. And but to know that in this moment right now, you're okay, and to acknowledge that. Um, and then also to think about how you have how you have dealt with uncertainty in the past. So if you could even think back to your senior year of high school or senior year of college, for those of you who might be um, further along in your education, that there was a time when you didn't know, you had an application submitted for school, you weren't sure um, if you were going to get in anywhere or where you would end up attending school, and how you were able to get past that. Or even something smaller, like taking an exam. There's a bit of uncertainty as well as that. Will I get a B on this exam? Sometimes we take exams and we walk out and we honestly don't know. We don't have that sense of certainty in your belly or in your heart about how the exam went, and how you were able to sit with that knowledge. And then there's the more practical things. There are things that you actually have control over right now, that you can do in order to take action on something. Embrace those things, lean into those things, and control what you can control, and let go of the rest. I know that students want to come up with a personal plan, and I'd like to just, maybe if I could toss out there, what are some of the things that are coming to mind, of like areas that you want to have an action, you want to take action on, or you want to have a contingency plan together. Like if we could kind of talk a little bit about what are some of those things that are more anxiety provoking, and see like where there is possibility to exert control, and what can we just accept as is.
So it sounds like there's an opportunity to open up for dialogue. And I love how you brought up this piece around what's in our control and what's outside of our control, and kind of just having honest dialogue. What are the things that feel out of control, and what are some things that, have been in our direct control? And I do not share this identity, so this is where I won't contribute, right? But perhaps maybe ask like supporting questions, or yeah, unless asked to share.
I guess I can start just like by mentioning something that I think about a lot when it comes to, you know, being somebody who has DACA. Um, and it's like it's an underlying thought. I think right now it's hard, but it's this about family separation. So that's one of the biggest things that I worry about is because for me personally, my siblings and I, we are all from different countries. So my brother was born here in the United States, and my sister was born in Canada, and I'm from Pakistan. So that's something that's a concern for me. And that's also, you know, another term is mixed status families. So somebody maybe in the family, immediate family has citizenship, and others do not. So it's kind of navigating the reality of what that is or that could be. I don't think about it all the time, but it comes up sometimes when I'm like, you know, because sometimes honestly I forget. Like I don't really think of, you know, I think of all of us, but then I remember like, you know, we're all siblings from different places. So I think that's something um, that worries me, and that's that's a place that I would like to have some type of plan about. I know a lot of people have asked me like, okay, like if I wanted to apply for Canadian citizenship. I don't know if that's in terms of the action plan or what we're giving out here, right? But you know, I guess just kind of, you know, thinking of what options and what, you know, how to kind of just process that and see, you know, where that leads us. But that's one thing I can contribute on that.
Can I ask you a follow-up question? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
So I think it's helpful for me, like whenever I'm trying to figure out like, how am I going to be okay in uncertainty, is kind of knowing the skills that I have, the tools in my toolbox. If I remember that I have certain tools, then the next uncertain thing that comes up that freaks me out, then I can say, okay, I don't like it, or I'm afraid of it, and I have these tools. And so, well, and I don't even know if you need to answer if you don't want to, but you've been in a mixed, right, status family for a while, and it's been 3 years under this current administration, right? And so how have you kind of, right? And so you don't have to answer, but right, you can think about like, how have I taken care of myself when this has showed up for me before, right? And you already started, like, you already named like problem solving, like, you know, I could possibly apply for Canadian status, right? But I think like recognizing, like, I think somebody who uses problem solving skills can be helpful. And what else has helped you in the past? Does that make sense? Because everybody's story is going to be different. Does this, I, not to put you on the
Oh
hot
no,
seat, but
it's
like,
okay.
does it making you think of it, any other kind of skills that it's tied to that? Like, what has supported you in the past in having a mixed status family over different time periods with the different kinds of things that go on in our country?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard for me to pinpoint, recognize like certain. I don't, you know, I think it's hard for us for ourselves to think of like those good traits that we have all the time or commend ourselves. But for me, I think it's the number one, and I think it's relatable to many people, is just making sure my family is taken care of. So my brother, he's a citizen, right? And he has certain privileges that we don't have, but also making sure that we are not um, thinking of it as like taking it as a divisive way, right? So I want my brother to succeed no matter what. And so my power comes, I mean, he's younger than me. So even if I don't have citizenship and he does, he still needs guidance. So the way that I process, the challenges is making sure that I can control my family's happiness and the contribution that I can give to making sure they are doing better and they're, you know, well off or something in that sort, right? So, and that's also the way that I succeed. I take that as an internal success as well, and making sure that I see that success that my brother and my sister have, and we're all like that for each other as well. So I'm really thankful for that family network that we have as siblings.
Yeah, so you really care about, you value your family, and you have ways that you can show it and stay connected no matter what,
Yeah.
right? And so I think, like, you're right, we often don't think in that way, which is why I really wanted to kind of go there a little bit, because I'm hoping that if someone listens to this outside of here, that they can start to think like, what are the things that I do? you know? So when I do this with finals, which is a whole different kind of set of stress, right? And a little bit more familiar and not as heavy, right? Like when you think about the first test you took as a little person, maybe first grade is the first memory you have, or second grade, like you develop skills over the years to now, right? And you got a little bit better. Oh, flashcards for this, study group for this, right? And so you can do the same thing, but it's really, you're right. We don't look for what's right. Our brains are wired to look for what's not right, what's wrong. So kind of changing and looking like, what is the things that resource me, ground me. Thank you for being open about that and going there with me.
Are there any, for other folks, when you think about conversations that you may have had either with friends who share the dreamer status or DACA status or undocumented status, or even family members, that there are skills or tools or ideas that have come up as part of the process of what you might do?
I really like the concept of thinking about a time before where I was struggling through something similar and kind of what I did to get out of that feeling of uncertainty and powerlessness. Um and you know, part of the part of the reason why I always say that I am where I am today is because of building community and those mentors and those people that have supported me throughout my journey. And being new to Loyola, it has been really difficult to find that community within Loyola, especially because I am an online student full time. I'm not there in person, and the times that I have reached out to people to see where I can build that community, I haven't gotten any responses.
That is good to know. I'm so happy you joined us today, and I just look forward to staying connected moving forward. And I will say, now that Loyola has had to go online essentially, that there will be more ways that you can connect with people online. So I'm sorry, I just had to say that part because things are going to change for Loyola moving forward once we get back to some sense of normalcy. So you can count on community for sure.
And I really just really want to lift up that that connecting with outside resources is helpful. I bet you probably know some folks that don't do that, right? I hear students that don't do that. Oh, I can't reach out, I don't, right? Or shy away, and I should do it on my own, right? And so I want to lift up that's something in you, right? That is a tool that you inhabit. And you've been on the lookout and you finally found it here. For that, I'm really glad, right? And where else is their community, right? So thank you.
Hi, I know I jumped in a bit late, and I apologize for that, but I some of the conversations that like I've been having just with like my family or people that I trust is kind of like that action plan in a way, because this is a very unique situation, and I know that we've mentioned just like uncertainties before and how we face those, but this is a very unique uncertainty, and I know that certain concepts can be applied to this situation, but it's also like one of those things where I feel like, at least personally for me, like it's a conversation in my family about like, okay, so if DACA goes away, what are things or steps that we can take to keep thriving? And it's come up in personally in my family, like returning back to our country. And I also come from a mixed status family, kind of like Filza. My younger brother was born here, and that's also like a whole another conversation, because personally for him, he was diagnosed with cancer when he was 3 or 4, and he's been receiving all his care here in the States. So I worry about that transition for him as well, because we can't leave him alone. He's only 12, so like he'd have to come with us. And just thinking about like how do we adjust and transition back into a whole nother country, I think is adds on to this concern. And um, I like what you mentioned about thinking back to other times as well, because it's almost like it's a whole cycle, like how we had to come here and what things we did when we got to this country. It would kind of be like a part two. But that's kind of like, I feel like other students aren't as well. They're thinking about options for them. And I don't know how Loyola plans on like, I don't know what action plan they have, but I think that it's something that they do need to consider. And I think that as the wellness center, it should be incorporated somewhere in there, because there's going to be an outbreak of students reaching out, probably disclosing, and it's going to be like an outbreak. And I think that there has to be a plan in the school, whether that's by each department or in general, because these are things that students now are thinking about. And I think that despite like everything else going on, I think that administration should also be thinking about this, because things will go down, and I think that we should be prepared.
I will just kind of share where we're at right now, and it's not much, so I will say that right now and own it as someone who works for Loyola. But I am a part of the Dreamers Committee, which consists of faculty and staff. And before COVID occurred, we were trying to get prepared for anticipating the different decisions that would be determined by Supreme Court. And so far, a lot has been put on hold with COVID, and there's, I think higher education is going to be faced with some bigger questions in terms of how it operates, right? Especially if students don't return to campus, physically return to campus. And so there's a lot of change that is on the horizon, period. But I think what we've been trying to do, or what some of us have been trying to do, is consolidate resources so that it's very clear for our undocumented, documented students what they can do, what won't be able to happen, right? Like being very clear, giving tips on if this affects, work study opportunities, here's where there could be financial support. And then also this means in order to protect yourself, like we don't want folks to exert free labor, right? Without being compensated for the work that they are doing. And so I'm working with career services to kind of identify those positions that students who are undocumented or documented could apply for that are not connected to work study. Each institution, or not each institution, actually, I'll just speak for Loyola. The CARES Act has just released to different institutions resources, and Loyola has been the recipient of that and has received funding. And right now we're trying to determine, can those funds be allocated to students who are undocumented and documented? And so, and what would that cover? And so we need to be able to say, if students are applying for funds, what would they be for? And then lastly, I would just say, right now, as we're coupled with COVID, we were just given the clearance to provide financial support to students who might be experiencing, food, housing, utility bills, travel emergency funds, things like that, a one-time opportunity through the Office of the Dean of Students. And so by submitting a care referral, so at luc.edu/CSAA, you would look for the hand with the heart in it and submit a care referral. And that's when someone from my office would then outreach to that student to kind of determine the best avenue. And first we'll work with financial aid to see if there's any additional funding, and then work with the Dean of Students to then apply additional funds. So that's kind of where we're at, but those things are slowly rolling out and will probably roll out after school is done, honestly. And but for students who are returning to campus, who returning to campus. So what this means is like for seniors who are about to be done, like these resources won't necessarily apply anymore. It will be more so for students who are enrolled for the incoming, for the following academic year. So that's something else that we have to consider, like are graduating seniors in a place where they need some support before graduation happens. And graduation still isn't solidified yet, and that happens possibly at the end, in August. And so there's just a lot of big questions to be answered. And I think it's even stress inducing to say that it's going to take time. So I want to also name that it's probably frustrating to hear that it's going to take time. But that is where we're at right now, and trying to kind of like bring together resources, create spots on different parts of our websites that kind of move students in the right direction. So you're right, Juana. I think the Wellness Center, like if we can work with them to like identify particular resources and name it up front, across the board for everybody, that's going to be powerful to like directly name those things. So that's what I will share for now. Sorry, I took up a lot.
I have a question about the CARES referral. Is that made by a staff member, a professor, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it's like actually, I think I can share this form with you all. So give me a second, and I can share the screen. So if you were to go to luc.edu/CSAA, CSAA stands for Center for Student Assistance and Advocacy. This is not like an actual physical office, but this center is more so a virtual space where students of concern can voice their issues that are coming up. And so if you were to scroll down, this is where you would report a student concern. And so this could be made by anyone, a staff, faculty, or student, or family member, anyone who knows of a Loyola student who has a concern. And there's different categories for the report. So if a student had, something around equity or Title IX, so anything around gender-based violence or like sexual assault, anything like that, you would submit an equity report. A behavioral concern would be for specific mental health concerns that are affecting your academic success. And these are like very specific to suicide ideation, like, high level anxiety, depression that's affecting you from like actually attending class, going to class, things of that nature. We have general academic concerns. So like if you need assistance with like getting in connection with your academic advisor, or need some guidance on like figuring out how to do incompletes or withdrawals, you would do an academic concern. And then there's CARE, which is a referral that I kind of oversee. And this is for like hardships outside of the classroom, right, that affect a student, so, and are complex in nature. So students with financial need or economic hardship, perhaps there's a death in the family and you need help with communicating your needs to professors. This is where you would go. And if you click on it, there's other options too, like student conduct, which you probably wouldn't, I don't know too many students who are submitting student conduct reports for themselves. But if you click on that hand, it will take you to the actual form that you fill out, and faculty, staff, students, family members, whoever is needed would be able to then submit their concern, and you would be able to select the different things that are coming up for you, and then kind of write your description of what's going on. So sometimes faculty might copy and paste an email from a student, or a student might just type in, what's happened to them. And so as you can see, there's stuff in here around social emotional adjustment, general mental health concerns, medical concerns, things of that nature. But right now, I've been dealing with a lot of cases around economic, financial hardship, family issues, health issues, and just trying to get students resourced adequately and as quickly as possible. And so that's kind of how it works. And I'm more than happy to send you the link to this as well if needed. But at least when you submit that referral, someone from my office that I work in will get it and will ensure that, you know, that you're outreached to and connected to the right people who could answer your questions. And in all honesty, sometimes there's no easy answer either. Sometimes there's no silver lining, and I do my best to be as sensitive and honest with students so that no one feels that they are also like being dragged through a process and then to only for nothing to happen. So that is kind of how it works.
And I just want to kind of go back to what we've been talking about. I want us to find the ground in this. I want us to find like, right, like your question about, well, what are people doing, right? That's problem solving, seeking resources, right? So we were talking about seeking connection, remembering that we have connections that are important in family, our values. And then there's the question asking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about knowing what's there. Even if it's not all we want, but we know. And I appreciate Paige saying like, and we're going to clarify, and it might not be everything,
Mm-hmm.
but I think there's something in that, right? And like at least we know that little bit.
Yeah.
And so can we like give ourselves a moment to say, well, I know something a little bit more now before, right? Because that helps us settle a little bit. So it's taking care of the nervous system as we're trying to figure it out. It's not that we're not trying to figure out and not trying to do some plans, but in between giving ourselves a break and settling in and kind of recognizing like I am doing something. We can't fix it. We can't know. But yeah.
So I will say, sorry guys, I dropped out, but as we were talking, for me, I'm sort of a visual person, but what kind of came up for me was this kind of image of like walking a tightrope and the safety net that's underneath. And you know, when I hear folks share their story and the specifics of it, you know, there's this idea of, you know, I'm a member of a community, I am a member of a family, I'm a student, an employee, and all of these different roles. And you're kind of walking that tension, right? That sort of feels like a tightrope, the tension of all of the demands and the roles that you have in your life, and it feels, the rope feels wobbly. We've got this thing out there trying to figure out what's going on with the Supreme Court, and wanting sort of an action plan or a safety plan. And as we talked about the different strategies, you know, folks talked about, you know, if I have to leave the country, I have options. I can apply for a status someplace, in an adjacent country. I still can support members of my family who have U.S. Citizenship, and I have friends. I have resources here at Loyola, and what came, it really formed for me, like it felt like strings, or that come together to form that network that makes the net. You know, that there are all these different lines or relationships or access, and and should something happen and you fall, that net, as you hit one, it sort of fans out, and the weight of it gets distributed across the network of ropes. And so as we were talking here, and we talked about like the individual skills that you guys have, the people that you have in your network, whether that's advocates here on campus or offices here on campus, as well as things off of campus, that together, as you start to tap into that, if need be, that they will splinter off and get you connected to other resources as well. And so I don't know, for the way I've kind of envisioning it is that that you have a plan of like, who would I tap into? And when the moment arises and it becomes clear to me what I need in the moment, that I have that you have at your disposal are various entry points into different resources. And those resources would then activate other resources as needed. And so what's important is maybe that not that you have steps A through Z, but that you know, here are my options before me. And when those situations arise, I'll tap into these different entry points. And even in that moment, if you don't know which one, hit them all, but they will then offshoot to others.
I love that, Andrea, and I want to be cognizant of time as well. And so, but I think you left us with such a strong point in kind of putting together our plans of action. We hold identities that historically and presently are so resilient. So, and I speak from that in my intersecting identities as a queer Black woman. And no one does community the way that folks do who are on the margins of society. And so you already come with a wealth of resources and connection points. And if you are connected to Loyola as a student, you now have access to a resource that has expanded your capital, your social capital. And so it's important to activate that and to communicate your needs. And moving forward, something that is quite tangible is submitting that care referral for yourself. If you're hesitant, if you're unsure, know that care referrals it's a private referral, and that it will force the institution to have to address your concern when there are numbers that cannot be ignored. And so also remember that too. If you send them in, then there has to be a response and it has to be reported out. And so I encourage folks to use that resource and then to tap into your networks of spheres of influence. And so for those of you who are not graduating and returning or are going to continue higher education but might have to consider other institutions as well, that's also a part of this problem solving, right? I encourage you to consider getting involved as a student leader. When you are involved as a student leader as well, you tap into additional resources and you begin to know more people. And so find your community, take advantage of leadership opportunities when it makes sense and if you have the capacity, and then reach out for help, because if you don't do it, the university can ignore it. It is easy for them to ignore it when it's not communicated through formal channels. But again, put your safety first. So if you need a friend who could submit a referral on your behalf, that is another way to ensure your personal safety as well. So I do want to leave us with those words and remember that we do have agency in this and we will take it one day at a time. We will not solve everything in one moment. Andrea wants to say one more thing.
Yeah, I also want to invite any student listening to contact the Wellness Center if it doesn't have to be a crisis. I feel like folks think that they have to be at their wits' end in order to access services at the Wellness Center. We are currently offering telehealth services for students within the state border. So if you're in the state of Illinois, we can offer telehealth services to you. If you are outside of the state of Illinois, we can get you connected to telehealth services. So if this is something where you're still feeling like you're struggling or that it's causing you some unrest and you want to talk this through, we are there is a staff full of people scattered about, but in the state of Illinois, that's here to support you. And we have openings. And so, again, you don't have to wait until the worst case scenario has occurred in your mind in order to seek assistance. This is something that you could certainly, it's an appropriate reason to reach out to us now if this is something that's causing you concern and you want to talk it through.
Yep. And once again, if you're listening to this and you want our contact information, just email diversity@luc.edu and someone from our team will get back to you. Just let us know what information you're seeking and we will get you connected. 1 second.